Morning, folks, and thank you sincerely for your time and your interest in the session. This is a session that myself, Jen and Orla, who you will meet in due course, feel very passionate about, and it's about a sustainable research ecosystem. And I think sometimes what we end up doing is those of us who are genuinely interested in the ecosystem tend to service a particular element of the system, whether it be undergraduates or postgraduates or PhDs. And what we'd like to do is have a conversation with you in relation to the common good that we should all buy into a research ecosystem and not just focus on a particular population at a particular time. And that's where our passion arises from. I will just maybe read some of the premise that we actually have in relation to putting the session together, just to let you know that we did think seriously about this and what some of the threads are that we'd like to explore throughout the morning. So when we look at research ecosystem as a term, it refers to the interconnected network of individuals, organisations, resources and processes that contribute to the advancement of research and innovation. And those conducting research are the core of any research ecosystem, and this includes the panel members that we've asked to the session today. So within UL, the Office of the Vice President for Research leads the formation, development and delivery of the university research strategy, the policy and the research support services. And the mission is to facilitate the growth of excellent, impactful and innovative research and knowledge transfer activities at the University of Limerick. And the office works with faculties, with institutes and with centres and the research community and UL management to grow research capacity, quality support, talent and funding. And the office, for those that don't know, authorises 4 operational units which we have representation from today. We have the research support services, we have research strategy and policy team, we have the technology transfer office, and we have the Doctoral College. So those 4 are very keen in looking to put together and to service a research ecosystem. And then other significant providers within UL that we don't always perhaps celebrate or are aware of the support are both HR, talent development, and the research services team at the library. So they're here today, as are assistant deans for research, graduate professional studies, and faculty-based supports. And we will hear from a number of those colleagues later today. So I think another piece just to acknowledge before we actually start, in relation to the celebration of research ecosystem, our colleague Dr. Orla Power just last week was awarded the EHS Research Culture Award for her level of support in relation to collegiality, collaboration, efficiency, and ultimately encouraging a research thriving community. So if we can, please congratulate Orla. Surprise. Okay, so I read the tips for chair when you're chairing a session, and one of the things was it's going to be recorded, so be conscious of that. And there was a line, so no offensive language or negative statements against groups. So I think we're safe perhaps on one of the two. You can determine which one we're safe on. So again, just respectful to each other's colleagues and comments. People have agreed to present. They're at different ends of spectrums in relation to academic careers. And I'm wholeheartedly delighted that we start the session with looking at panellists in different groupings. So what we're going to do is we're going to group 2 undergraduate students who have had an opportunity to do research scholarships within departments or schools. And we're going to partner them with 2 postgraduate candidates. We'll then package the postdoc as a group, and then we'll look at assistant professors, supervisor and mentor. And that'll be the first session that should take us round to about 10:30. Okay, so really rich first hour. Everybody has been given 8 minutes within their groupings. Everybody, I think, has done their homework, and to give you all due consideration, people have contacted the other person in their grouping and they have a discussion about what they would actually share today. So just remember again, some people are presenting today for the very first time in front of an audience. They're going to share and be honest as much as they can. So again, please give due consideration to that. So if we start off, let's have then, if we can introduce Zara and Owen, who will come to the panellists. And these are two colleagues who had taken up undergraduate scholarships within respective departments or schools. and please the two postgraduates, Fatima and Pavin, and we'll work through them in turn. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is, you have 8 minutes. For those that know me, you have 8 minutes, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over first to Owen and Zara, and I'm going to ask you to work through the questions as they're relevant to you in respect to your experience. So the panellists were asked to consider their experiences accessing the research environment at UL thus far, who or what has supported their experiences or access to the UL research environment, what changes to the UL research environment might enhance early career research access, and what might an ideal early career researcher ecosystem at UL look like to them. Okay, so let's start then with our two colleagues who undertook scholarships as undergraduates within departments. You might introduce yourself, where you did your scholarship, and lead off. Okay, thank you, Owen.
Hi, so my name's Owen. I'm an undergrad currently in the sports science department. Just about to finish that there in a couple of weeks. And I did the PES internship last summer. So it's a research internship. It's usually that a lecturer will come up to you and ask, do you want to do it? And it's just a paid part-time scholarship. It's usually about 8 to 10 weeks in which you usually help out with research that's already ongoing, or you can also suggest something yourself and pursue that, which is what I did.
My name's Zara, and I did Viper in the psychology department 3 times. So I recently finished my master's. So Viper is a voluntary research internship that you can undertake during the semesters in the psych department.
Okay, so let's deal with Zara. So who or what supported your experience?
So I feel very lucky that I got to be part of the Department of Psychology in UL. So through Viper, they encourage you to partake in research with lecturers in the department or researchers in the department. So I got to undertake 2 in my undergrad and 1 in my master's. So as part of that, you get to get first-hand experience in research with people who are experts in the field. So you get an email through your student account, and then they propose topics and lectures that you can work with. So you can select to do it or not. So there's loads of encouragement in the department to take part. And then the research is also encouraged through every week we have a seminar in the department. So we're encouraged to attend that, and they invite lecturers and researchers from UL and also from around the world to talk about their research, and we kind of get to learn from all different aspects of research in psychology and from other areas and how it links to psychology.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? Similar question to you?
Yeah, so so the PES internship was suggested to me by one of my lecturers, and he was then my supervisor, Frank Nugent, and he was also my supervisor for placement, which I did in UL. And I think that generally in the PES department there's a big emphasis on research, and you'll always hear lecturers talking about research, and they're always interested in talking about it with you if you have an interest. And like almost every lecture, I would stay back afterwards and talk to the lecturer about stuff like that. And I think it's really open in the PES department. It's really good that way. And there's a lot of resources within PES to avail of if you are interested in research.
Okay, I wish everybody would stay back and talk to me after my lecture. You might just follow up when you were talking before we started about, where you now find yourself in relation to, your thoughts in having research experience.
So initially I went into sports science with the idea that I do an undergrad in sports science and then a master's in physiotherapy. And then over the course of the undergrad, I kind of found an actual genuine interest in research, and thought that it might be something that I wanted to pursue. So then did the PES internship almost as a kind of a trial run to see if I would actually enjoy it. And I still haven't made the decision between the two, to be honest. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, I definitely enjoy research, but we'll have to think about it.
Zara, is there something or is there advice you would give to us collectively in relation to how to perhaps heighten the exposure of opportunities that undergraduates could have in relation to accessing research and perhaps beginning a research journey?
Yeah, I think like the internships are a great idea to have, but perhaps encouraging them even more, or offering the opportunity of getting it recognised in your transcript that you partook in internships as part of your undergrad would be really enticing for a lot more people, and would probably encourage more undergrads to take part in the research element. And I think like a mix of interdisciplinary talks would be really interesting. So how different disciplines interact with each other. So not just focusing on perhaps the discipline you're in and the research based on that, but including how your area also interacts with other areas and seeing the impact that research can make.
Wow. Two excellent suggestions. We can stop the session now. We've got our answer. Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Owen, yourself, anything that you would advise?
Yeah, so kind of again, just encouraging the use of them more in terms of, like I said, there's plenty of sports in PES, but generally the only way you find out about them is if a lecturer actively walks up to you and says, you should do this. We do get an email about most of them, but we get so many emails that a lot of the time they just kind of get ignored. And I think that, like, I saw the email every year. I only did it like in my third year, so, somewhere between third year and fourth year. And I think if it had actually been said to me in a lecture, or if there had been a session about it in person, I definitely would have done it more. And I would have loved to do it multiple times. But yeah, I just don't think it was like pushed enough necessarily. They're all there. And if you want to go looking for them, they're all great supports. It's just that I think they need to be pushed towards students a bit more.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And then finally, both of you, in relation to what might an ideal space look like for you as somebody who's considering an early career in research?
I think encouragement from the get-go is really important. I know my experience in research in the psychology department has been really positive, and they've always encouraged partaking in research through modules, or even interacting with lecturers in the department and reading papers, research papers as part of your modules has been really informative. And I think that's been amazing in creating the research environment, especially in the psychology department. And I think if that was to continue and more collaboration with students and lecturers would be ideal.
Great, thank you. I see Owen nodding.
Yeah, I think there needs to be kind of a smoother transition into pushing people towards research, because like there wasn't much talk in first year and second year. Third year we went on placement, and as soon as we came back from placement, it was immediately, you're going to do research. There was an assumption immediately you're going to do research, and it hasn't been kind of broached up until that point, really. Like a lot of lecturers have been saying to groups during lectures, when you do your PhD, when you do your master's, and a lot of people are looking going, this was never like mentioned to me. I didn't really even consider that as an option. And then suddenly it's an assumption because you're in fourth, you're going to go into research. And they haven't had time to kind of think about it, because it hasn't even been brought up to them really before that point.
Okay, I'm going to stop us there. We're just within our 8 minutes. I think what you've actually both done really eloquently is, sow that seed in relation to how important it is the research ecosystem comes back to undergraduates as well. We tend to start with our PhD colleagues, and I think you've done a beautiful job in relation to convincing us that, we need to extend that ecosystem. So thank you very much. Let's move on then to both Fatima and Pavan. So again, maybe just introduce yourself and a bit about your background and your experiences within a research environment at UL.
Thanks. I'm Pavan. I'm a fourth year PhD in UL. I did my master's in 2018 in UL, and then worked as a research assistant for a year, and then started my PhD. So I've seen the growth from being a master's and applying for funding and getting the PhD and moving on. So had a lot of support from a lot of different people within the support system, the research office, the finance department, and my supervisor and the support staff within the institute. I'm based in the Bernal Institute. I'm doing my PhD in mechanical engineering. The technical officers are brilliant there. So that's been my experience so far with research.
Thank you. And Fatima?
Yeah, hi. I did my master. I am Fatima, and I did my master's from Queen Mary, London, in public international law. Then it was a very smooth transition uh, to doing a research that is of criminology and international law. And I'm doing it in hate crimes, and I'm exploring it in international context, like how hate crimes are conceptualized internationally. And I'm the interesting, I don't know, but I came here after marriage, and after that I explored funding and the research opportunities here in Ireland. And it was a very different and intimate experience as compared to the other countries. And I did not actually get any funding, but I got a fee waiver, which the AHSS fee waiver. And the main support that I received was from my supervisor. She actually helped me a lot in from very basic, like preparing a proposal as well. So that I found in the UL. And as compared to the other universities where supervisors, they do care. I admit, but here I got very close support from my supervisor and the research office, and like they respond to you very quickly, and they make sure that your problem is addressed. And I hope to continue my research. Like, I'm second year PhD student, so I hope I will finish it in the next 1 or 2 years.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's very nice to hear two PhDs who are so positive about their experience. Can I ask you, even though you are positive, what would enhance, do you think, your experiences as an early career researcher? I'll go back to Fatima first. So what would enhance your experiences?
Firstly, like as I said earlier, at PhD level, I think supervisor support is extreme. Like, your compatibility with his supervisor, but your support, continuous support from your supervisor is a key. And secondly, the funding opportunities here in UL, like even if you're not getting funding, but you can get into PhD if you even receive a fee waiver. So one thing is that, and secondly, the research environment here in the UL, I found it very supportive, not from just your supervisor, but also from the other lecturers and her peers as well, but from the other staff members as well, the academic staff as well as administrative staff. Yes, and the other one I want to mention is Dr. Neve. She has been an excellent support throughout. So yes.
So we're talking Neve Lenihan.
Yeah,
There we
Neve
are. Give her her
Lenihan.
full name. There you are. Yeah. Okay, well done. Thank you. And Pavan.
I would say when you're in the sciences and you're managing a lab or getting lab supplies, you have to deal with a lot in Aggresso, which is our enterprise resource system. And a lot of my colleagues have had trouble getting used to the system. And oftentimes they wait a week or two with going back and forth with the finance department saying, okay, this is the code that is needed and what other information is needed. So I think one thing that would enhance the experience here would be having workshops from the finance department every 6 months or so, at least for the newcomers. I mean, there's a lot of tutorials on Aggresso system within the website, but it is very general. When it comes to specific cases, especially in the sciences, it gets difficult just going back and forth with needless wait time. I would say having those workshops would help quite a lot, where they could recognize the common mistakes that they see with the claims or with the purchase orders, and okay, you can do this to avoid getting back to us. So that's one thing that would enhance. The other thing that I would like to highlight is the visa issue for non-EU, especially in Limerick. We've seen in the last 3 years, the wait time is insane. In 22, the wait time was about 8 weeks from the time of your email to getting an appointment. And in 23, it's been, I think, 12 weeks, and currently it's about 20 weeks. So it takes about 5 months just to get an appointment to renew your permit that you need to do every year. And you can't apply for EU visas with 3 months of expiry on your permit. So what happens then is a lot of non-EU researchers can't go to conferences which happen around the time of their expiry. So there's currently, I think, about 3,000 international students that UL gets in every year. So I'd say having talks with the governments or enhancing the support there would help a lot of the researchers. I've spoken to some of my colleagues in Galway, and currently what they say is they get an email the next day saying that their appointment is in a month. So at least they have that email to go back on if you're applying for visa, saying, okay, I'm getting my appointment, I'm getting my renewal, so I can apply for the visa now. And having that system at least would help. And currently, I think in Dublin, they have an online system where everything is done quite fast. So support in terms of the visa would help a lot.
And the visa is probably the most common inquiry that would come across the Doctoral College's email account, asking for help and assistance with that. But you're absolutely right, that's determined at a national level. And I think it's something we could try and look at. And we've worked with UL Global, and they work incessantly in relation to trying to help this. I actually have a postgraduate researcher who is in Dublin today looking to try and get visa. So we all live that experience with you. I think what you've done, both Pavan and Fatima, is highlight some issues. I mean, Aggresso is one, the financial system, by which, again, it's an ecosystem we're all accessing. It's not just staff who access Aggresso. There are others in the system. And I think, again, that gives us a nice example of working, collectively in a space and not looking at siloing people in relation to the services that we provide. So you've all kept to time. You've all been honest, very transparent, and you've actually all given very good, I think substantial, ideas in relation to perhaps how we can look to improve the system. So if we can help show our appreciation, please, and we'll switch to the next panelist. Well done. Thank you. Okay, you're all very welcome. Jenna's just informed me she will speak less because she's getting to speak later in a session. So not that she doesn't speak, just that she has chosen to speak less and give others the time. So you're all very welcome. So maybe we'll start. Let's start with Jenna then. If you're talking less, a bit about context, please.
Absolutely. So I'm Jenna. I'm doing a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship in physical education and sports science. It's actually my second postdoctoral fellowship at UL. This current fellowship is 2 years, and I'm coming to the end of that, have half a year left. But I did 2 years before where I accessed Canadian federal funding to come to the University of Limerick, which of course was online in COVID. A little bit of context.
So I'm Louise. I'm a postdoc in the School of Allied Health. My background is in psychology, but I'm based in the School of Allied Health at the moment. And I'm working on a postdoc that's funded by the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland and the Department of Transport. So I'm finishing up one contract at the moment and starting another shortly for the next few years. So, thank you.
My name is Jackie, and I'm a postdoc at the Bernal Institute, and I'm working with the Dairy Processing Technology Center. So in general, we're working with dairy industries to provide the best technology to solve their problems.
Okay. Yeah. And can we stay with you, Jackie, and you talk to us a wee bit about how you've accessed the research environment or community at UL?
I finished my PhD in 2020. In the center of COVID. So it was a bit difficult for me when I had to change from PhD to research. But then afterward, I got a position here and I moved in. And one of the most difficult things was to get acquainted to the system because people were transitioning to the COVID times to now to the full time. So it wasn't the easiest stage. But then when I started my my supervisor were there, and then they really helped me to understand how's everything going. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Louise?
Yeah, so I guess we met before to chat about our experiences, and one thing that came through was the different workshops available across the university. So one that comes to mind is from the Human Resources Department. I know they're regularly asking us about our research needs, and the Aspiring Research Leaders program is one that's come recommended to me, so I'm planning to do that soon. And then other spaces across the university, so from different research units. So for example, for me, I would have done some workshops with the PPI Ignite group. I'm also from the library, developing research skills that way. And then also from the EHS, we have Orla. So for example, the Research Funding Clinic is one place that I would have access, and that's really nicely tailored support for your career stage. So in terms of the stage right now as postdoc, finding out what different kind of grants and funding opportunities are available, that was really tailored support. And I know there's also some supports for specific funding programs in that space as well. So kind of across the different spaces in the university would have attended workshops, clinics, and so on.
Thank you. And Jen, is there anything in addition to that?
In addition, I would just highlight some of the requirements of my fellowship around open access or around data management were able to be fulfilled through workshops through the library. So it was very helpful for me that there were dedicated workshops, for example, for data management and open access to allow me to fulfill the requirements of my fellowship that were for the European Commission that were totally new to me. So that was a big support that I accessed.
So here's the meaty question then. So as staff members, postdocs are classed as staff, what changes to the UL research environment might enhance, early career access, particularly as postdocs, to that research environment? I'll start with Louise.
Yeah, so I guess one thing when we met a couple of weeks ago that we spoke about was identifying maybe differences across our different departments. So there's some really nice supports available in some faculties or departments or schools. So an example would be a research representative who's on attending school meetings, research committee meetings. So that's in some schools, so it could be nice to expand that model out to others. Jackie might talk about the handbook in your institute support.
At the Bernal Institute, we were trying to facilitate new researcher when they're coming in. So they were trying to provide the guidelines that when you come in, this is how you can get the card, how you can, for example, access to a grade. So what are the people you need to go to? And so there's several things that are set up in the Bernal Institute that allow us to really come and navigate better in general. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's lovely examples of really nice supports, but maybe integrating them across different departments and learning from each other about what works could really help people who don't have necessarily these handbooks or the research rep in their school at the moment.
Okay, so the system in a sense, depending where you're positioned or where you actually reside, you have different access to different services.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And Jenna, anything?
I think we had really great, anytime I needed to be in touch post-award, there was great contact in the post-award department. Something that might be helpful is just a sense maybe at the outset, how long that's going to take, because as Pavan raised, some of us need to get different work permits and these kinds of things. So maybe if there's a kind of an overview provided to you of what to expect over a great number of months. In my case, I think 6, 7, 8 months before I even began. That might be great. Even though there's great communication back and forth, it might be nice to say, here's what you might expect over the next number of months to prepare.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally, an ideal career researcher ecosystem at UL, what would it look like?
The ideal career researcher for me is because when you finish a PhD, your mind is a bit in the cloud because you just finished and completed one of the most difficult areas, and you kind of trying to move from one place to another, but you not really clear. And sometimes I felt like it would be nice if I get a test of everything at the beginning, training on what to expect in academia as a lecturer, maybe also as a researcher, but also when you have to present different type of webinars. And also if we could also have the opportunity to access, I know it's there, but then it's not really pushed towards the researcher, an opportunity to really know how to write a proposal, how to submit a proposal, and really what is the importance of applying for researchers' funds. Because you just go from PhD and, for example, you had scholarship and you didn't really have to worry about these things. And it was a bit challenging for me. So it would be very nice to have support from the get-go. Like as soon as you arrive, you have webinars to attend. You need to know this is the pathway to this, for example, to academia, or this is the pathway if you would like to explore industry more. This is what you can do.
Okay. Thank you. And Louise?
Yeah, I'd really echo what Jackie has described there in terms of that transition from being a PhD student to now being a staff member. And you're doing a lot of the same tasks as you were as a PhD student, but responsibilities and roles do change quite a lot as well. So I think that support from the outset in terms of getting to know the specific, maybe you've moved institutions, maybe you've moved countries, the specific system you're working in would be really super. And I know there's courses available and you see they're for a 3-year post PhD and then you kind of rule them out straight away, but it might be nice to kind of cover that early phase a bit more intentionally.
Okay. Given you're going to talk again, I'm not going to ask you. I think, Jackie, you raise a point that certainly comes across, for PhD candidates in relation to our own space, is a wee bit more information in relation to what the expectations and reality of being a PhD candidate are. And I'm hearing that in relation to postdoc level. I think we make assumptions sometimes that people know what they're coming into. I'm going to do a PhD, but they have no notion perhaps of what that is and or a postdoc. So I think, we might consider, spending more time in that space and educating people. And I think the problem that people have said in doing that is you might turn some people off. Well, then there's an ethical dilemma, moral dilemma in relation to what do you share with people that will allow them to have a reality or a real perspective of what they're coming into, as opposed to bringing them in and then them struggling when they find themselves in the system. So a really pertinent point. So thank you again, folks. We're within our time. So thank you to the postdocs. Very good to come. Thank you. You're very welcome. Cecilia, let's start with you again. Just who you are, where you reside, and how you perhaps got here.
Yes. Hi, my name is Cecilia Benaglia, and I am assistant professor in French in the School of Modern Languages and Applied Linguistics. And so this is my 3rd year at UL. Just a bit of background, right? And so before coming here, I did all my PhD and postdocs and first tenure track job in North America, US and Canada. So yeah, that's for me.
Hi, I'm Brendan McGowan. I'm a lecturer in geography. I'm just coming to the end of my 3rd year at UL, which will be my 11th year as a lecturer after jobs in Edinburgh and Liverpool before moving to Limerick.
Hi, I'm James Gleeson. I'm head of department in mathematics and statistics. I'm also probably here largely because of my position as director of the Centre for Research Training Foundations of Data Science, which is a large PhD training centre shared with UCD and Maynooth. I suppose just to give context, my PhD, I didn't realize yesterday my PhD vibe was 25 years ago. So PhD in Caltech, I postdoced in Arizona State and in UCC, started lecturing in UCC, and I'm here in UL about 17 years. So that's.
Oh, right. I'm Mike Quayle. I've been at UL for now 9 years, originally from South Africa. I did my PhD late in my career, so a bit of an odd one, but I finished that in 2011. That's about it.
Okay, let's go back to Cecilia. who or what has supported your experiences and access, to UL research environment?
Yeah, so I think, several people and teams at UL, but I'd say maybe the most important person was the assistant dean for research in our faculty. So coming from, abroad, so this was... I wasn't familiar at all with the Irish research environment, a bit more maybe with the European one, but still not very familiar. I think that basically most of the information concerning research grants or fellowships came through the assistant dean, who really so Tina Morin for us, who in our faculty has this role of sending us all the opportunities that are available, but also kind of put them into context and say, this fellowship would be very good for colleagues working in these areas or doing archival research or whatever. So that was really, so last year I got a grant from the Royal Irish Academy, and I wouldn't even have applied probably without learning about it through Tina. And also, I've participated in a couple of meetings organized by the research support team on specifically European grants, and that was also really, really useful. And now I know that the next thing I'm going to do is actually contact the research support team and, go more in details on what the next available opportunities are.
Okay, so the infrastructure has worked for you.
Yeah.
To where you are at the moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And Brendan?
I want to give a shout out to Claire Ryan and AHSS, who's been incredibly helpful in, suggesting funding opportunities, giving info about them. We've had seminars with people who have got the funding before coming in, talking about the process and that. I do also want to give a shout out to John Quill in Finance, who's been really, amazing in helping to put together budgets for research proposals, and, Finance is providing the budget templates and everything. So that's been really good to have that support. And I want to mention the UL Citizens Assembly as well. That's been an interesting experience over the last year.
Okay. In what way, Brendan?
Just given an opportunity to get seed funding for projects that isn't really available in other sources, and something that is being directly connected to Limerick as a place. It's nice to have that kind of focus.
Okay, great. And James?
Yeah, again, I suppose I've been around a long time, so I had a huge amount of support from Research Office, Support Services, Tech Transfer Office, UL Legal, all the speaking on behalf of supervisors in general, I suppose we do rely very heavily on the Research Office in particular to direct us and provide a huge amount of assistance. And given the places I've worked, I know UL is really up there in terms of the quality of help that we get and the person-to-person feedback we get on proposals. So that's hugely appreciated. We're a bit fortunate in MAXI within the Department of Maths and Stats. We have a business development, a research manager. James McCormack is sitting there just behind Puneet. He's new in the job, but again, really important role, someone who can take a high-level view of what's coming in terms of calls and help direct it to people, supervisors who potentially could apply for funding in different areas. That's a hugely important service and helps us to liaise then with all the different offices. Supervisors typically have to apply for the funding for PhDs and for postdocs, I suppose, in many instances as well. And of course have lots of other jobs and calls on their time as well. So speaking on behalf of supervisors, I suppose it's just to point that out to people, and we couldn't do that without all the support services that we get. And I think supervisors in general aren't perfect at what they do. So, a lot of the things, the improvements that people have been suggesting this morning are noted and really important ones. But those supervisors need training and help along the way as well. And I guess that's part of the reason we're having this session. I think it's just good.
And if I may come back to that point that James has made in relation to the support, that, I think there used to be an expectation that those who were earlier career academics would be given a PhD through a scholarship or an internship, and that's unlikely to continue. So I do think your point's very pertinent in relation to there needs to be an upskilling with early career colleagues in relation to how do they secure PhD candidates through other options rather than internal funding. And that arose in a workshop we did last Monday. So we're going to do a follow-up in June with early career colleagues in relation to sharing with them opportunities that they have to apply for funding, from mobility funding to Irish Research Council, etc. So I think that culture has changed. The internship or scholarship notion of being internally funded is likely not to continue. So it's a very pertinent point. Thank you, James. And Mike.
So I'm going to take a slightly different approach here. So
That's why I asked you, Mike. This is why I asked you.
the other people have done quite well at sort of talking about the formal supports at UL, but I think what I've found most helpful are the informal supports. So in my department and my faculty, we have a number of little informal groups that people have set up organically to discuss and work on particular little subtopics that are of interest to them. And people in our department are often members of more than one of those. So we've got this lovely sort of horizontal cross-fertilization of ideas. And I've found those groups to be really fundamental in helping me get funding, helping me get published. Because personally, I find this a very difficult thing. I find writing academic work extremely vulnerable. It's a difficult process. It leaves me feeling completely exposed. You know, that rejection you get from the journals, you send in a piece, it's your best work, and you get like 3 rejects, and you're like, do I even belong here? And that emotional process of like building yourself back up, trying to decide which of these ideas are good enough to send back, where are the reviewers actually right, where can I push back? Without that kind of informal support from colleagues that I trust, I wouldn't have. I struggle to publish anything, but I wouldn't have published as much as I have. So I think finding colleagues that you trust, that you can work with, that you can discuss things with, is like those informal supports are kind of up to ourselves and really fundamental. Another example is very early in my path at UL, I had this problem that needed a bit of maths expertise. So somehow I ended up knocking on James's door, and just the incredible kindness that people show each other at UL. We ended up meeting every week for about a year. I think we put in put in a proposal for a PhD scholarship, which we supervised together. Having that on my CV made it look like I knew how to do maths, and then that was a pathway towards an ERC proposal. So I would really strongly recommend that you look around you for colleagues who share your interests, who are willing to help, and build up that kind of organic network as much as you can.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think sometimes we focus too much on, the crude services or what the services are, opposed to the people that are providing them. And I think, there is some education to be done, I think, with a number of colleagues in relation to the sense of academic or scholarly community. I think sometimes, people have reverted back to silos in relation to working for them, on them. And those that know me would know I'm a huge advocate, for that sharing of mentorship or scholarship in relation to, the common good. That's another lecture altogether in relation to what the common good is. But I think, there's a philosophy there that we can tap into, and it might actually, after today, it may not be the services per se that the message is to. It's to colleagues, and how we can actually harness the expertise we have in individuals. That actually is where we need to do the work and spend the time. So thank you, Mike, for going off script. You worked out well done. Let's stay with you, Mike, then, in relation to the changes, to the research environment that might enhance early career colleagues.
I'm going to go off script again. I think one of the weird things about the Irish research environment in general is that we allocate 40% of every academic's time to research, but largely expect people to do stuff without any specific funding allocated. So I would say a big thing, something that would make a massive difference for not that much money would be to allocate a small amount of funding to every academic. Because at the moment we have a kind of pyramid structure where successful people like myself are able to hoover up massive amounts of research funding, when actually there are a whole bunch of people who have 40% of their time available to do research, but just need a little bit of funding to do quite a lot. So I would say that's the biggest thing we could change.
And do you have that funding to share?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Thank you. James.
So one of the things I wanted to raise, and maybe this is the right place to do it, is around the future careers that aren't in research, or at least aren't in academia. So as part of the PhD training program that we have, we're deliberately having a KPI around the number of PhD students that go to industry rather than going to academia. And that's part of that difficult conversation, that ethical dilemma I think you mentioned earlier, where people are keen to have PhD students, they don't turn them off. But the reality is that some pretty small percentage of people who have PhDs will end up in academia. That's the honest truth of it. There just aren't that many jobs in academia, and there are a lot of PhD students. So I think we probably are still doing a disservice to our students all the way from research undergrads up to PhDs if we don't point that out and help them develop themselves in a way that is as suitable for going to industry as it might be for going to academia. We in our CRT program, for example, there's very deliberate modules on entrepreneurship. We work closely with the Tech Transfer Office, and all those students go on industry placements for 12 weeks as well. And that's all part of the setting up of networks, I suppose, for their future careers. So I think that aspect of networking and being aware that not every researcher is going to end up in academia is important to be fair to them.
Okay, thank you, Matt. James. Brendan.
I don't think that it's the research part of the environment that needs to change. I think it's everything else. Like that idea of we all have 40% of our time to do research. That's a lovely dream, you know? It's supposed to be 40-40-20 research, teaching, admin, but in all honesty, it usually ends up being more like 80-20 or 0-80-20 or even 0-120-20, because we often end up working like 60-70 hour weeks just to do the teaching that we need to do. And you know, I just feel like assistant professors can get so overloaded with the teaching and admin that we just literally do not have time to do the research. In the last year, like I have been dropped from one research project that I had the idea for and that we got funding for because I just didn't have time to do it, and I haven't had time to put in other proposals for projects that, you know, I'd got collaborators with great idea, just didn't have time to write it up and put it in. And the response to that from above was, well, it's good to see that you're, you know, putting the teaching and the students first, which, like, all right, but that doesn't get me anywhere, you know? And my progression is going to depend on me getting research funding and getting publications. Not that I even had time to submit a progression application for the last 2 years. So now that means that I have got no job security and there's funding that I can't even apply for anymore because I don't have a contract that's long enough for it. So my opportunities are getting fewer and fewer. So that's kind of what my experience is like. What assistant professors need above all to do research is time. And if we do not have the time, it does not matter how innovative or how inclusive or whatever your research ecosystem is, because we can't engage with it, you know?
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly, I hear you, and there are 2 points perhaps in response. I'm not suggesting it solves all problems, but there is a workload allocation model that's been newly agreed. Yeah. And if anything, it encourages that conversation. And I think, you know, if we can encourage colleagues to use that as a means of having a conversation and understanding your workload, that's one piece. I think the other piece that you prompt me about is, you know, in the recent research annual performance report, there's actually a graph that notes that the very significant amount of, it's classed as LBBs before the titles changed. Mm-hmm. I think it's 25 or almost up to 30% of lecturers below the bar who are not supervising PhD candidates. And I remember I actually stated at the committee meeting where it was being discussed, was that my hunch was that wasn't because they didn't want to supervise PhD candidates, it's because they were not either being given the opportunity or they didn't have the time to supervise. So I think you've hit on something that I would be delighted to work with you in relation to that capacity piece for supervisors. We're trying to do a piece of work on that at the moment. So I wholeheartedly hear you.
I'll have a chat with you about that. I mean, I think I'm really lucky that I do have 2 PhD students at the minute where I'm co-supervisor, but both of those were ones where other people took the lead and got the funding for it and so on. And, you know, the attitude just seems to be of, you know, well, you can do research over the summer, right? Well, yeah, in between the repeat exams and supervising FYP students and writing another new full module for next year and so on. So, like, our time is just getting wiped out by everything else.
I appreciate your candid comments, and I think they would resonate with many people at that level. So thank you.
Yeah, it's like I'm not just giving my own thing here. I'm not the only one in my discipline or whatever that is so limited for this.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And maybe speaking to this question of time, another solution we discussed with Brandon was maybe setting possibilities for teaching buyouts for anyone, not just assistant professors, really. So that could be, you know, like you can apply to them with a research project. That could be effective. And so one thing I also wanted to mention, maybe if what could be helpful is having more internal budget for conferences, to go to conferences, because what I know happens, at least in my school, is that the budget we have is quite limited, and we are like 4 or 5 assistant professors, so it gets shared, like that's, you know, very good. We are considered like the priority, so the budget is given to us, but then what happens is that the other colleagues, more senior ones, are left without not much. And so if more budget could be allocated to departments specifically to research trips and conferences, that I think could be helpful. And one thing also we discussed, and it's a bit like not maybe as directly connected, but concerns the setting up of MA programs, because, you know, it speaks to that continuity from undergrads to PhD and postgraduate, postdocs and assistant professors. And so I think if there could be maybe less restrictions on setting up MA students and MA programs, and I'm thinking specifically to the minimum number of students that is required for a new MA program to be accepted, which I may be wrong, but if I understood well, it was increased recently, and it's now around 15 or 20. And I think this is, you know, potentially a problem for maybe specifically certain disciplines, and I think about the humanities, of course, where if we have an MA with 10 students, it's already like great, because these are not, you know, disciplines that, especially in the current environment with the housing crisis and other things that necessarily attract a lot of students. So maybe if, you know, there was more consideration to the specificities of each discipline, that I think could be helpful as well.
Thank you very much. Now, I've taken liberty with the time. I've given more time to the 4 panellists here. I think because, you know, not only have they come through some form of system in relation to early career and moving along, but also in reflecting for the early career academics that you actually work with as well. So, conscious of time, if I might just ask those who are braver to maybe just a final comment in relation to, you know, what might an ideal early career research ecosystem look like? Is there anything you would share with us that you think we haven't covered?
Again, briefly, because it's kind of related to what I was saying, I think to me an ideal research environment would be one where the differences between disciplines are recognized and disciplines are not valued or evaluated on the basis of economic logics, and where, you know, the institution understands that there are certain disciplines that will never have the kind of economic direct impact that other disciplines that, for instance, tightly collaborate with industry have. and that we can consider those disciplines as public good, and so we have still to invest as an institution in those disciplines. You know, I'm from the humanities, so that's, of course, so this would be one thing. Yeah.
I'll finish with James.
Conscious of assistant professors and the difficult pressures, I suppose, that are felt there. UL is almost unique in the Irish system in the sense of having a tenure track system for assistant professors. So I think that means that basically assistant professors don't have tenure until they've progressed, and Brendan's already shown us some of the pressures that imposes on them. It has other implications. So, for instance, many of the funding agencies won't allow people in that position to apply for PhD, even for PhDs, because they need the contracts to extend beyond the 4 years. As head of department, it causes issues because if we interview candidates and they have another offer from another Irish university, it's almost always a tenured offer. So it actually makes us less competitive. So there are many reasons, I think, to change that part of the system. That's something that we're actively trying to do.
Before we thank the four panelists here, just to thank everybody who's contributed to the panel this morning. If anything, it only heightens the level of humbleness that I feel in relation to working with colleagues at UL. I think there is a notion of a common good. I think predominantly everybody is looking to make the environment better for all, and I think that's come out this morning. And what we're going to do after the break is we're going to have those people who provide some of the research support services just react to what they've heard, discuss perhaps what they're doing in the space that they're in, and perhaps something that they could take with them that they've heard today that might be something that's feasible to actually enhance that research ecosystem within UL. So on our collective behalf, please could we show our appreciation for not only the four panellists on the stage at the moment, but for all that spoke this morning. Thank you sincerely.
My name is Orla Power-Grant and I'm the Research Funding Officer in the Faculty of Education and Health Sciences. So I suppose Research Week is all about creating opportunities for our research community to come together, for people to share ideas, and there's been lots of wonderful ideas shared already this morning and personal experiences. And it's also about making connections. So I suppose that was one of the reasons we wanted to build in a break into the event to allow people the opportunity to talk to colleagues maybe that they haven't met before or haven't seen for a while. So far this morning, you've heard from the different members of the research community. We've shined a spotlight on their experiences and on the system as it currently exists. So if you can imagine, you've heard from the players on the pitch, the people who use their talents and skills to allow their brilliance to shine. And in this part of the session now, we're going to turn our attention to the management, the support staff, the backroom team who create the enabling environment. So we have colleagues from a variety of divisions, which for me is reflective of the cross-functional team effort that it takes to support research and researchers here in UL. And what we're going to do, I'll introduce all of the colleagues, and then we're going to give each of them an opportunity to share, I suppose, what things from the conversation they heard this morning resonate with them and their work that they're doing within their particular division. And maybe any ideas that has sparked for developments within the future. So our panel, we have two Assistant Deans for Research, Professor Michael Morley, who's the ADR in the Chemie Business School, Dr. Elaine Kinsella, who's the Assistant Dean for Research in the Faculty of Education and Health Sciences. Representing the Doctoral College, Dr. Jared Downs, who's the Postgraduate Research Development Manager. From HR Talent Development, Alison O'Regan, who's the Head of Staff Learning and Development. From the Office of the VPR, Dr. Puneet Saeed, who's the Director of Research. From the Library, Aisling Hayes, who's the Head of Research Services in the Library. Also from the Office of the VPR and the Technology Transfer Office, Paul Dillon, who's the Director of the TTO. And then finally myself, as a faculty-based research support staff. As I said, I'm in Education and Health Sciences.
I just want to say thank you for organising this event. It's been really, really interesting and so nice to hear from the different perspectives and different career stages. I think once you move on, you kind of forget what it's like at the different stages, so it's been really, really valuable. I've taken a very researchery approach to this, and I've started trying to categorise all the information and the different themes. So it struck me that some of the key themes coming up, the first one is around development and training. So lots of kind of formal supports through HR, through library, through internships, lectures, knowledge with impact seminars like we've been running in EHS have been really, really valuable. The next one is around support, both informal and formal support. But I think one thing that came through to me was the value of peer support. So whatever career stage you're at, it's really helpful to talk to other people who are going through similar challenges. And I think that's where things like the Emerge network and the Emerge PhD network really has value. But also what Mike talked about earlier through centres and through institutes, where you get to meet up with other people who are working on topics, sharing information, hearing about what they're working on and getting support, and just getting those little tidbits of advice, which sometimes is hard to ask for more formally. The next one was around funding. And in EHS, we're really lucky to have Orla Power Grant as our designated EHS research funding officer. And we have a host of supports on funding for all the different career stages, but we also have internal funding supports that people can access through seed funding or postgraduate research supports and fee waivers, but also those proposal supports where you can go along and get training on particular funding calls. So I think that's really valuable. But there's other things that came up that struck me as that we could definitely do better on. And one of them was around recognition, recognizing the work that people are doing. So we do have research awards, but I think we could do this better, recognizing and highlighting the research success of people at different career stages, whether that's through like on our websites or through in how we involve people, giving people at all stages the visibility of their work. And the excellent things that they're doing. And the last thing I really struck me was the influence. And what I liked about this event is that we're hearing from people at different stages, which is giving them a pathway to influencing the system in the future. And I think we need to do that better through participation, getting people involved in different committees and different platforms for hearing the different views and for actually changing the system as we move forward to make it better and to really enhance the ecosystem for research.
Thank you very much, Elaine. I think visibility and voice was, I suppose, the idea and ethos behind all of this. So I think it's nice to hear that being, I suppose, reflected in the comments and things that are coming across. So we'll move next to Ger.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Orla. And again, I just want to reiterate my thanks for all the organisers, all the work of the research office and yourselves in this session. It's been really great. I'm going to just set this to 3 minutes because I'm very conscious of time. I tend to be quite sometimes too loquacious. I just want to talk about the supports in the Doctoral College and things that we've tried to do in since the creation of the Doctoral College itself over the past year or so. And what was mentioned in the sessions earlier was about visas for PGRs. This has taken up an inordinate amount of our time. It's become a real issue. It's become almost intractable just trying to get visas particularly for non-EU PGRs. And I know I've spent a lot of time for example, in the last number of weeks trying to bring PGRs here from other institutions. It's been a nightmare. I've been onto embassies in Hungary, in France, elsewhere, just trying to get PGRs who are based in the EU but non-EU PGRs over here. And likewise, it's a really difficult problem for so many of our own PGRs, and we're trying to do that at a national level and with the IUA itself. About careers, and James mentioned about careers and preparing PGR for pathways beyond careers. We've linked up with the HEA Odyssey program, and we've rolled that out here in conjunction with UCC. We've done that for 20 of our own PGRs, at the end of which we've linked in now with Enterprise Ireland, and there is a pathway. There's a pathway to SMEs program that PGRs who have undertaken the program will be able to avail of, and after they finish their PhD, they will have the option then of being placed in a small or medium enterprise, engaged in a research-oriented career, paid at a postdoc salary for 1 year. So that's something that we've tried to do. Also, we have funding from the from Horizon Europe, and we're very much engaged in a program called Doc Talent for EU. It's all about enhancing PhD employability. And one of the outcomes, and we're compelled to do this, and the Commission have told us that if we don't do this, they'll take the money back. So we really have, that's one good thing about European funding, but we have to create what's called a talent management center for our PGRs to allow them to see the options that are available beyond academia, and indeed within academia itself. I don't think we should exclusively focus on providing careers outside of academia, but just creating pathways for PGRs is absolutely fundamental. The other areas I'd just like to talk about are we've done, we're trying also to create a system under that program of digital credentials so that PGRs get accreditation and acknowledgement for the work that they're doing, because it's become a real issue. A lot of PGRs have told us that they are very reluctant to engage in programs that are in addition to their PhD if there's no formal accreditation for those programs. So even though it may help them in terms of their future professional and career development, there's still that blockage there because they're not fully accredited programs, and that's obviously an issue for us as well. We've also looked at the whole area of enhancing supervisor training, because that also is fundamental, for the well-being of supervisors and also for our PGRs, and something which we discussed in detail as part of the Doctoral College Work Packages group last Friday was having a researcher, a PhD supervisor award. This is something which I think I'd have to speak to Anne in a lot more detail about this, but this is something which we'd be very keen to reward the excellence in supervision here on campus, which we see all the time, but again, there's no formal acknowledgement of that, and something which I think is really important to do. So I've gone over 3 minutes, so I'll just stop there. So yeah, there's a lot. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think there's, you mentioned a couple of really important things there, the interinstitutional collaboration and the fact that the Doctoral College can be that formal link and connection, I think is really important. So it's really good to hear. Okay, next we've got Alison.
Thanks very much, Orla, and thanks to everybody who spoke today. It's been really, really helpful to hear from you. And I suppose one of the really key things that we all must remember is that you are the ecosystem here. You're the people who this is about. We're just the support in the background, and we really need to keep that in mind and really continue to endeavour to meet you where you are in terms of the supports that we provide, and keep listening to you. So in relation to that, I suppose, a few things really came to mind and struck me today, that, everybody's challenge is different. And again, that we're really trying to tailor supports to make sure that you get the supports that you need. As Mike Morley said, it is, navigating through research and finding your way through research is opaque and difficult and complex. And anytime anybody contacts me about mentoring, finding a research career path or a research pathway and research trajectory is the absolute number one thing on their list that they speak about. The other thing that really struck me is around communications, and, making sure that people know the supports that are there, and that we're making those readily accessible to them. We've done a few things recently, so I'm really hearing the point about induction. We do general induction, but we've also started one for research staff and for assistant profs particularly. So again, hearing you about, again, those expectations that we think people are aware of, but really making those very explicit, and perhaps drawing on people to talk about that as well within those sessions. Within the university, I suppose the very big thing that I would always have in mind is how we work across the university with all colleagues to embed a very strong culture of development. And somebody spoke earlier about the generosity and kindness that is there towards early career researchers. And, we hope that people experience that on the ground. We hope that's reaching into every corner. But I suppose our job is to continue to work with fantastic colleagues to continue to really build and really work on that. And to make sure that, that looks as it should as we go through the different stages of career. So certainly what a postdoc or an assistant prof needs, can differ a little bit from what a postgrad student needs, but to make sure that in our ecosystem, that building block is kind of an obvious trajectory of skill development. And with that, the postdocs, I suppose, are availing of that 5 days of CPD that is now written into their contract. that we're working with PIs and others in terms of how we can all support people through that, and also helping them to navigate the realities of future careers. So, for example, there is a program called Navigate, which is building on the Odyssey one for postgraduates, for postdocs, and again, with a view to where people might want to work in the future, whether that's in academia or beyond. Research culture is something that's getting a lot of, I suppose, airtime at European level, and equally I think this is something that we really need to be talking about here in the university. What does it feel like to work in research? What supports are in place, how they extend to every corner of the university, and that, you know, whatever happens centrally doesn't just remain as a central support or something that we're putting out into Connect collectively, but something that people are really feeling and availing of, and that they really feel that supported culture here in the university. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great, Alison. Thank you very much. You know, I think many of us have availed of mentorship and seen the value of it. And I think that idea of cascading mentorship kind of aligns with, you know, this idea where we're of a continuum of, you know, across the research careers. So I think it's a very important point and well made. So next, Puneet.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Orla. So first of all, it was a really insightful series of talks, and you know, your question is what resonated. Actually, a huge amount of it resonated. So thank you for being candid and open with what you shared this morning. I think a lot of things have been covered, but one thing that I felt strongly. So our office, the Research Support Services office, which is part of the VPR's office, our only raison d'etre is to provide supports to researchers. And we are constantly trying to make information available regarding, you know, funding opportunities, post-award supports, constantly trying to improve the quality of the information we have. And, you know, we have a new initiative now where, because I sense from what I heard today that people are accessing supports in different ways, but all the supports are provided from the perspective of the support provider and not from the perspective of the researcher. And so we're trying to put together a way of accessing supports based on your research journey, as opposed to who you have to go to get that support. So we're looking at that. But what really struck me was that, and it came out in a few of the talks. It was in what Owen said, and also in what Pavan said. We're providing information, we're providing systems, we're providing services, but unless you know what to look for, you won't find them, and that's a problem. And especially, you know, you give the example this morning of internships. So unless you know internships is a thing, why would you even search for it, even if all the information is there? So I think that resonated with me, is that while we can make information available, we can't make people enthusiastic about it unless we go in front of them and actually talk to them, and why should you do this? And I think that is possibly missing in the way we are sharing information in general. So I think that's something that we would take away and try and look at how to do that. I think face-to-face time, and I've had this recently, it doesn't have to be in person, but it can be in person or online, but I've had this recently. I spoke to the Emerge network about research supports, and I was giving information that I thought would be very mundane and not useful at all. And several people said to me, oh, that's the first time I never knew that was in UL. And some of these were very experienced people. So clearly we have not made it known, all right? That's on us. So I think that's a takeaway that we need to take from that. And I suppose the other one was, what resonated with me was what Mike said about informal supports and peer supports. And we see, because we deal with researchers across the whole institution, across all faculties, we see greater success from those that have close-knit peer supports. Irrespective of what great services we're providing centrally, the peer supports make a huge difference. And we find that those that have those do better. Those that don't have those, with some exceptions, may find it more difficult. So there are, like James mentioned, the Maxi group. That is the I think, the epitome of what a close-knit peer support group is like. It is not necessarily at a faculty level or even at a whole department level. The closer you can get to your research interests, I think the better. And I think that's something that we need. We have research centers, and I think Mike may have been referring to the CSI or research center, which is a center within psychology. I think the more we can do with those types of research community activities internally, I think that will strengthen the environment as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Puneet. And that's an important point in terms of capturing the good practices that are happening and letting others learn from those experiences as well. So it's great. Okay, thank you very much to this group of contributors, and we'll have the final three people, Aisling, Paul, and myself. I will take a seat now.
Thanks a million.
Thanks, Orla. I think a lot has been said already that I'm probably just going to repeat and reiterate. I'm going to start a little bit though with what was called research culture, and it's come up a couple of times. I know Alison, you mentioned it. And it's something I have noticed in the work that I do. One of the services that we provide in the libraries, we provide a metric service, or if you want to come to have your narrative CV, some training or to have it reviewed, we provide that. And the amount of times somebody has asked me, will you do me a favor to do this? And I've gone, this isn't a favor, this is my job. And I question that then and say, where are we with our research culture? We are said we're a research-led university, and yet it feels as though the people coming to me feel that their research is selfish, that it's something they're doing for themselves, when actually, we've mentioned it here today, we have a 40-40-20 workload allocation model. It's your job too, it's my job too. And it's changing a bit of that culture and saying that actually this needs as much time and consideration as you're teaching, as your professional service. They're all equal. They are all equal, and we all need to do that. And that was something that came across to me today, and it really resonated because, as I said, I've been asked for a favor a few times. I don't know how we change that, but I think there was a lot of really great ideas in the room today. And Puneet, you just mentioned it again, those informal networks. I also noticed that when I look at metrics, and I look at some, I've gone to a few people and gone, you're a sole trader, aren't you? I can see from their metrics and say, the more you collaborate, the better you're going to work. And this is in areas where generally metrics actually work very well. I can see when they don't collaborate within the university. I can see it from the metrics. And again, we can see that then they find it harder then to develop as a researcher. You might get so far, but the more we collaborate internally within our own groups, and what I say to you then is make use of me. Make use of what we do. If you have a small network or group, you might have 5 people, you might say, would you come and talk to us? I'm only delighted to talk to you because I've got 5 interested people who are getting me at the point that they need me. You're actually taking a load of work away from me. I don't have to schedule a workshop. I don't have to put out advertising. I don't have to do any of that. You've taken a load of work from me. Please contact me and come to us. I don't think it was mentioned a few times, is that idea of a researcher journey. And that's really, really important. And I know like the research office and Cathal and Ann's team are actually working on that at the moment and bringing all of us professional services who work together into that to give you an idea of that journey, of where we are, who supports what, where the supports are, and how you can access it. That's something even at a local level within the library we're really trying to do. We're trying to move to a more image-based, process-focused, where we are in the supports. So what we do for you, how you can contact us, where you can access our services, and how that might fit into your research journey. So that's one of the main areas that we're looking at. And another thing that's come up recently, and I'm going to stop here now. Another thing that's come up recently is what I've noticed is, particularly with postdocs, we don't communicate very well with you because we communicate on a faculty basis. And often when it comes to a postdoc, you're in that faculty, but are you not? Do you go to faculty board? Do you not? And there's a question of how do we actually directly communicate to you? So in meeting with the postdoc recently, talking about some of the services in the library they could use, some of our technology enhanced services particularly, or collections they could use for research, they were like, but nobody tells us. We've no way of knowing this. So how do we contact that? And I think that's something we need to think of. I can send an email to all research postgraduates. You might not read it, but at least I can send it. I don't think I can send an email to all postdocs. No, I have no way of doing that. So I have no way of directly contacting saying, this is just for postdocs here. And I know there are ways I can get around it. I can go to the ADRs who are fantastic in that, but we are not communicating directly with that group. And I think that has come across here today, is that we're not getting that direct communication. I'm going to stop there now.
Thank you very much, Aisling. Some really important points there. Yeah, very well said. Thank you very much. Paul?
Hi, when I heard I had to go on stage, I said I better make a few notes. I suppose I'm pulled in, I'm director of the TTO. We're responsible for innovation, which is the patenting side, or which you might say the IP side of UL. Enterprise, which is engaging with industry, and entrepreneurship, which is maybe creating your business, or at least creating skills in you that might help you in your career. The way we've always looked at the office in terms of we are a service, as Puneet said, we're here to serve. We're all here because of the students at the end of the day. That's the way we see it. Even the postdocs are part of the student education system in our view. And so what we see is complexity is growing. Research is getting very, very complex. There's a lot of new features of it coming in terms of new regulations, etc. The impact agenda, open innovation, open access, there's just an awful lot happening. We're very much at the impact end of things, and we're trying to help researchers translate their research into some kind of impact. And I would add is that in terms of building entrepreneurial skills, I was once at a research proposal writing course myself many years ago. It's a sales activity. People don't realize it. You're selling what you can do with your research rather than selling how good you are. And a lot of researchers kind of don't see it that way. But in fact, I was on a sales training course and it was exactly the same as the research proposal writing course. So it's not something that comes off. Comments on what was said today. We've been looking at entrepreneurship all the way down the pipeline. We bring in transition year students. We work closely with the Kenny Business School on a range of fronts around entrepreneurship. And what we're trying to do is educate the students, even from the TY side, right up to researchers, postdocs. We're trying to do that through what people have all said here, that it's a structured approach. We're working closely with the HR function, the Kenny Business School, the Access Office, and other players. And the idea is that our programs, where we stitch in with the existing training for both postgraduate researchers and also for postdoctoral researchers, that there would be credit-based programs so that people who are attending our programs acquire credits for it. So we're kind of fitting in with the Postdoctoral College and all of that. I thought James Gleason's comment resonated very heavily. A large amount of PhD students, even postdoctoral research staff, will not stay in academia. Industry is actually climbing over each other to get at you, by the way, at the moment. Probably don't want to hear that now if you're a leading principal investigator of a research group, but right now there's a shortage of, in particular areas of very high qualified labour, and that highly skilled labour is in big demand in certain sectoral areas. So, and I think the question is, are we readying our PhD students and our postdocs for those kind of roles in the workforce? And I think that's what we're trying to influence about. I talked about working with, the other thing that resonated was Mike Quayle's comment about the lonely journey of the researcher. And I think a lot of people don't realize how lonely a journey it can be. And that's been our experience of dealing with the researchers, particularly, when they're research, they have a research group, they're trying to drive their research direction. And it was great to hear that people are getting into groups, because, we've always tried to look at the researcher as a social entrepreneur. Everyone wants to see their research used in some way in society. They don't necessarily want to make money out of it. And we're there to try and see if we can help that. If we can make a few quid along the way, that's nice as well. But translating research into some kind of real world situation for us, going beyond the journal paper is what we're trying to do to help researchers and get them to see that as an integral part of their career, that process and the steps involved, that they can acquire those steps through the training that we provide in the TTO. If you're interested in further, we have a talk at 2 p.m. this week from Alessandra Bacicotti from the University of Bologna. And if you're interested in EU funding, she's going to talk about how the impact agenda is at an EU level, because the EU is getting very serious about the impact agenda. So I would just encourage you to go to that. But that's kind of my comments, really. We've looked at all the way down. We're kind of looking at the undergrad side, but I think that's reasonably well served by Kenny Business School at the moment. So we would see our journey starting with the postgraduate side, right through the postdoctoral and reporting the researchers. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. And good to plug the other events as well happening. There's a busy program for the rest of the week. Okay, so I'm very conscious of time. I'm going to keep my own contribution as succinct as I can. I feel like many of the things that have been mentioned already have resonated with me too, but we've heard some of the points already. I suppose I will start off by saying, I've been in this role for 9 years. I'm not the only faculty-based funding support, so I see Claire sitting in the audience. So I suppose a shout out to all of us, and there are others coming in other faculties soon, so it's great to see developments and things happening. I suppose one of the things that I obviously feel very passionate about, which is this development of a research talent pipeline. And in terms of the things that I have been doing, I suppose in my role, and some of it has been mentioned already, people have talked about the funding clinics that I run. I do that for PhDs, for postdocs and for faculty. And that is an opportunity for me to obviously put funding on people's radar, but it's also a really useful opportunity for me to get a better understanding of people's research. And I feel that by understanding the person and understanding their work, that helps me to be able to direct relevant opportunities to them. But one of the things that I have done at a faculty level is to offer, I suppose, training and support for people in applying for external funding. And for many PhDs, they're applying and they haven't any experience of doing it. So it is about enhancing their experience and guiding them through the process. So we have a proposal development program that I run for people applying to IRC. And I suppose there's kind of 5 aspects to that. And obviously, my role in delivering that, but I see myself as kind of an enabler. It's actually a faculty-wide, I suppose, contribution. And there's many people within the faculty contributing. So we have information sessions where previously successful applicants come along and tell their personal story. And the idea there is to motivate and inspire others to want to get involved. I run proposal writing workshops. We also have a repository of previously successful applications. So again, through people's generosity, they're giving back to those coming behind and sharing examples of their successful proposals. We also have a peer review panel, so people give of their time very generously to read applications in advance of submission and provide feedback, and that's hugely valuable. And then I've used some of the educational technology tools that exist within the institution to develop a virtual learning platform. So some of the people that apply with us are not based here in UL at the time of applying, so they can use the tools and supports and the video tutorials and resource materials. And I suppose my role in all of this is bringing all of that together. But ultimately, it's about the person applying, the doctoral candidate, empowering them to utilise the knowledge and skills and experience that exist within the institution. And of course, as well, it is about driving success for the faculty or for the institution. And we have seen good success as a result of this approach. And I think that, we've looked at and monitored those transitioning off internal funding. So people have mentioned today fee waivers and internal funding and seed funding. And we've seen that many of our successful awardees were previously internally funded. So I think in that way it's contributing to, I suppose, a sustainable research ecosystem. So I think those types of approaches, we're starting to do them in other areas, but I think there's huge scope there to broaden that out and take that type of approach forward. I might leave with one final thought in terms of things that I'd like to see in developments for the future. Aisling has covered some of it around postdocs, but for me, I suppose that's one thing. That Doctoral College has been a huge development within the research ecosystem and a huge benefit to giving visibility and voice for postgraduate researchers. And I'd love to see something similar for postdoctoral researchers so that they have a collective voice and the visibility and that we can, showcase all of the excellent things that people are doing there. So that's my final piece.
We've heard today a number of really considered experiences firsthand around the supports and kind of hopes for the future. And we've also heard a lot of thoughtful responses from the different support structures. So we have a few moments left and we want to dream a little bit together, okay? So you're welcome to use the Mentimeter, but of course, if you're comfortable to speak in person, we would love for you to do that. So we want to ask, open to everyone, panelists, support staff, anybody, what are some of the priorities? We've raised a lot of ideas now, so how might we action this and dream for the future? What are some priorities from your point of view that you'd like to see the university address to support an early career research ecosystem?
Are we as an engaged community post-COVID as we were pre-COVID? my perception is we aren't. And I don't know why. And I don't even know if that's even an accurate statement.
I think it connects with Puneet's comments there. And it's something that in some of the meetings we had leading up to this was raised around, especially, I'll speak for research staff maybe, in some departments there's only 4 research staff, so it can be quite a lonely community, and as Aisling raised, research staff are not contacted in the same way, so I think, yeah, some level of engagement, not just for research staff, but that's one specific example, different ways to connect, because it can be lonely. Thanks, that's a really great comment. Engagement. Any other ideas around the priorities?
I suppose one of the things that I do think that we could do better is putting together and making very accessible the supports that are there and making them very, very visible to people, so that, you know, you're not going on to all kinds of different websites that, yeah, they can be on the website, but there's also a central repository. And so it's easier to understand how to navigate through that if you're somebody starting off here.
The other day, and somebody said the hardest thing is just finding out who to ask, right? And so I think the more that we can do this, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, just to probably follow up on that and Paul's comment, I think coffee mornings, like research staff coffee mornings, would be a good idea. I know it's been successful in our department in helping to bring people back on campus and getting them to chat to each other. It's one thing to get people back on campus, it's a whole other thing to get them to actually talk to each other, I find. So, and Alison's completely right about the accessing, but someone needs to stand in front of you and mention it to you face to face in order that you even go look for these things. Otherwise, as we've heard a few times, things get lost in email or in the traffic. So some way to get people to come together and have those informal chats more regularly, I think, is important, and probably particularly so at the early career stages.
Thank you so much. I see we have some comments on the Mentimeter here as well, and they're reflecting a lot of, I think we can even scroll down, reflecting a lot of what we've spoken about today. So thank you everybody for dreaming with us together. I'll turn it over now to Anne just to have a closing comment.
Thank you, Jenna. Firstly, I have to apologise to Aisling because I am the person that comes on to email and says, would you ever do me a favour? I've done it a number of times now and it's like cringing there. So clearly we have some inherent behaviour that, you know, we don't go and ask for things. And I think that's a really strong comment that came from that reaction panel at the end, that, you know, the services are there. These people are paid to do what we ask them to do and apologise when we ask them to do it. So I think there has to be some level of empowering people, you know, and we need to find a way in how can we empower ourselves and each other in relation to, it's okay to go and ask for that. You know, it's okay to have the conversation about workload. So I think there's a piece in relation to trying to prepare people to know what they can ask for in a reasonable way, and to have that conversation. So I think that was one of the strongest things that came out for me. I think the other thing as well that I've heard throughout the day in research community, and people tend to think of infrastructures, and I think stronger today was people. And I think there's something, again, very humbling about that. And I'm delighted on James's piece about, you know, I think we're missing a huge piece by not meeting face to face and having that conversation. And that's certainly for the first year of the Doctoral College, that's where we put a lot of energies in relation to meeting with the postgraduate researchers, because that's what matters, the level of isolation that people are feeling. And again, I siloed. So I think that's the impetus. I think we've heard it quite strongly today that we need to start to do more sort of community-based, you know, discussions. And I think the latter point that I think Jenna or Orla commented on in relation to the power of actually listening to others who've been in that space or done. So yes, we can share as much information as we want, but to hear from somebody that's actually inhabited that space or actually accessed that service and what they've got for it in return, I think is really powerful. So rather than, you know, those of us who provide services standing up saying this is what we do, why don't you listen to such and such? They've actually been through this, they've got experience of it, and I think that's where the power lies. So just really thank you very much for your interest and your engagement. This is how I think sessions should go in relation to hearing from people who are living and the realities. I think the message has been today that the services and the ecosystem is there. It's how we can best, celebrate what's in that system and how we can best maximise it, to everybody's potential. So on behalf of everybody who's involved for today, I just sincerely like to thank you all. Thank you.